All right, MFP community, we are on another episode of the Just Show Up podcast, and this week we're going to try to follow up. We had a good one last week with Jackie Falcone as our guest member, but this week we're going to start to segue into a few topics that I really think that'll be beneficial for you as, you know, we're transitioning into the fall phase or just the fall season. And so as seasons change, you are also changing as well, whether if it's just within your lifestyle, whether if it's on a physiological level, and so many more opportunities that are just going to arise with us here at CrossFit MFP. So Coach Joe and I are ready to get into this topic of manifesting your reality through CrossFit, right? So this is really going to be a fun topic, and we're all geared up here. We got our, new MFP swag. So let's get into this, all right? Let's get grounded. So let's sit up nice and tall, wherever you're at. Again, just remind yourself that this part of our experience is to really just center ourselves to just be in the present moment. Just take that time to stop doing, slow down. Just be aware that you are here, ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to improve. And also just recognize that you are. You might ask yourself, I am what? And the answer is you are anything and everything. You have this infinite potential to be as awesome as you make your reality to be. So let's take 3 breaths. Take a deep breath to the nose. Hold. Exhale. There you go. Inhale. Exhale. Slow, long, controlled exhales. Last one. Inhale. Long hold here. 3, 2, let it out. All right. Joe, manifest us a quote here.
All right, so this quote comes from a book called The Anxious Generation. Actually, the book was referred to me by Coach Ryan here, so thank you, Coach Ryan. Great reading back. The author is a social psychologist from Penn named Jonathan Haidt. Basically, the book is about like the rewiring of like young people's brains and how it's went from like physical play and physical connection to digital, and just like the negative impact that's had with mental health. And there was a quote I was reading over the weekend that really stood out to me. It says, "As the Stoics and Buddhists taught long ago, happiness cannot be reached by eliminating all triggers from life. Rather, happiness comes from learning to deprive external events of the power to trigger negative emotions in you." Anxiety really is fear of something happening, not fear of the present moment. So, a lot of growth comes from, recognizing triggers and recognizing that cycle. We kind of get ourselves in and just learning how to adapt and learning how to evolve and learning how to really just come back to center. And it's a process, and everyone does it in a different way. But, I thought that was particularly relevant and powerful for everyday life and a lot of the stuff that we emphasize and practice here.
That's actually a really good quote for today, because when we talk about this idea of like what manifesting is and what it means, it's coming back to this, potential that we have. And part of the components of manifesting is being aware, to develop a more widened perspective and widened awareness, widened consciousness of what's going on in our lives. And the only way we can do that is by experiencing the here and now. And so if we are letting, what's happening in the future, limit ourselves from the here and now, we're limiting our potential to manifest. Because usually, as we start to now shift into our topic, this idea of like what manifesting actually means and what it is, I think some people will usually might think of, making a future, right? I'm thinking about a future concept with manifesting. And yeah, that's a component of a byproduct of manifesting, but manifesting is actually being in the here and now. And I'll touch on that a little bit, but I would ask you, Coach Joe, I think this is just good for me to understand, when you hear the word manifesting, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about it?
The first thing that comes to my mind is speaking something into existence, or putting something out there into the universe to become a reality. Obviously, this is somewhere that you have a deeper level of knowledge than me, but when I think of it, it's, having an idea, putting it out there in some way, whether it's written, whether it's verbal, expressing it, and then committing to it through a mantra. Having a daily practice that makes it reality. Because there's the component of expressing a desire and expressing a want, and then there's the action. And to me, it's you need both. Because I could sit here and say I want something to happen as much as I want, if I don't take action, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. There's layers. There's a lot of layers actually to how we manifest. And so throughout this podcast, there's going to be probably parts where you're going to get, in the loops and maybe get lost. And so just know that we are going to bring this back to the ground level at the end of this podcast and this discussion, where we kind of make this a little bit more relevant to you in terms of how do we use CrossFit and our physical body as a tool to create a reality for you, right? And what's best for you and what's meant for you. So the first thing is, the reason why I kind of thought about this is we had a great discussion with Jackie last week that really came about this idea of discovering your true self and, transformation in the gym and all these really cool things. And it's been on my mind for quite some time with the components to how manifesting works. And I just really thought that this would be a great opportunity to touch on this topic today. So first thing is, for me, being someone in the world of entrepreneurialism, because in CrossFit, when you are a CrossFit affiliate owner, you just do this by yourself to some extent. You have, the CrossFit brand and you have resources, but when you sign up to be a CrossFit affiliate owner, you literally start the gym in your own unique way. And so I really found that, attracting to me when I, decided to start CrossFit FP and start my own business. And, in the world of entrepreneurs, we have the world of sports performance, where we talk about athletes visualizing their performance to make it become a reality. And then we have these just general ideas where we learn how to create goals for ourselves. How do I have a goal? How do I set an intention for myself from being from here today to being, somewhere else down the road? So I think everyone can really take something for this. So let's kind of go into what the definition of manifesting really is. And the way I describe manifesting, it's the act of creating. You are creating something through a multi-dimensional process. So all that simply means is there are little parts that create the whole. It's not just one little detail. There are many components to how we actually learn how to create. And to give you an idea, it starts with, let's just say, a thought, right? You think something in your mind. And then that thought becomes maybe an experience, right? Not necessarily an action. It could be the experience of an emotion. I feel some sense of, excitement. I could feel some sense of maybe even, fear, but I feel something. There's an emotional component. But to experience, we then have to act, right? So we're having this action, right? This ability to show up in that thought, that emotion. All this is going to create a feedback for us. So we're going to create, we're going to have some sort of given, reaction from the experience. And then that gives us the ability to become aware of what just happened in that space, become conscious, and then we have the opportunity to then change and then to evolve by choice. We can take that as a way to move forward. We can take it as a way to move backward. So that's very general, right? So let's just say, for example, I have this thought of, I want to go to a gym, right? I want to, try getting into, physical fitness. Then I have this experience of, excitement, a little bit of nervous, showing up to a class. Then I have this challenge of the class. I have this experience and feedback from the class itself. Maybe it's the intensity, the physical sensations. I have some sort of feedback that come back to this consciousness and awareness back into my mind that allows me to then create or finalize this evolution or change in myself to say, oh, hey, this is really good for me, or hey, this is really bad for me. And hopefully we take that in a way that, oh, this is really good for me. How can I continue to go through this process of create, get feedback, have an experience, expand my consciousness, and to then, continue to change and continue to evolve. And so that's like a general concept of like what manifesting actually is. And if you kind of break that down, really these are all things within the present moment, right? We're focusing on like all those little details are here and now pieces of being multidimensional. We'll talk about that in a second. So what does that pop up in your mind there, Joe?
I mean, for me, like what is most interesting is that it is about the present moment. I think that when people get a thought or an idea or desire to be better in some way, to grow in some way, your mind automatically shifts to the future. You get a thought in your head of like, man, in 5 years, like I want to be at this level of fitness, or I want to be at this point in my career, or I want to be at this point in my relationship. But, regardless of what your goals are, whether they're physical, whether they're relationships, whether they're professional, like sometimes it's hard to focus on what am I doing right now. And I think that is like, for me, even like when I think about like my own ways to grow, it happens to me too. Like, I think about like where I want to be tomorrow, where I want to be next year, but like, what about right now, and learning to just understand where you are right now and what you could do right now. Because life is about choices, right? Like what's your choice right now to make what you want unfold, and that just really stands out to me because just as a person who's always trying to improve and grow, I've definitely fallen victim to just looking too far ahead, and not being where I'm at.
Yeah, guilty as charged as well. I think it's, it's kind of fun sometimes to think about the future, right? I mean, that's part of the human experience we would like to take a brief moment to give a shout out to our sponsors. If you are looking for the cheesiest, mackiest places of all, you better get yourself to MacMart, opening September 15th to an Ardmore mainline spot near you. Just kidding. Although we are supporting MacMart here on a day-to-day basis, since we just had our last podcast with Jackie. We just had our first technical breakdown.
Unreal.
Now, we'll just put it like this. We probably recorded about, another 10 more minutes past.
We had about 10 minutes.
10 minutes past from where you're hearing right now. And so we caught it, hopefully, thankfully, before we started to finish this podcast. So we're just going to continue where we left off and basically talking about this idea of like looking towards the future. And I just was saying through that, like, that's kind of part of what we're supposed to do. Like, I mean, as part of our experience, looking towards the future is, it's fun, right? And it does allow us to have growth. Not saying looking towards the future is, not something that we should do. It's part of our being and part of our nature. But again, it's trying to come back to this very present awareness and moment, being in the here and now. And so from here, this is where I start to kind of transition a little bit more into this idea of God. And I'm not going to go too deep into this. If you guys refer back to the Manifesting Your Reality Through CrossFit article that I just wrote, I'll go into a little bit deeper, explanation of what I mean and how this all kind of comes into play. But the idea for me of looking at God and breaking down the idea and concept of God was to blend the worlds of science and spirituality, of really trying to find truth and understanding to what God means and how does that apply to us with our true purpose of being here within this human experience. Like, what's our true purpose? And it's the idea of being creators. Like, we are designed to be creators. We are designed to create any and every reality that we want to through our multidimensional skills. And so when I talk about the idea of God, first is, like, I'm not really trying to, trigger anybody from a, religious ideology standpoint, or, even if you don't believe in God. It's just the idea of we all come from somewhere, someplace, something. And if you refer to any, religious or ancient text, it's the idea of creation, right? Yeah. God created light, in the world and all these things. And so when we refer to, like, what does that actually mean? I describe God as a conscious mind, this idea of as above, so below. And so we know we are a conscious mind, right? We have our brain. We have this beautiful, magnificent thing in our skull that allows us to then create these thoughts, emotions, feelings, and processes that give us feedback and that gives us an experience. And so the idea of this God source, I'll call it infinite intelligence, I'll call it infinite creator, I'll be funny and call it G Master Infinity Boss. It's the idea to create, to evolve, and experience itself. And so what does that mean? Well, every single bit of creation is to just simply create this feedback loop of experience, awareness, evolve. Experience, awareness, evolve. And it's an infinite process. And so that's exactly what we do, right? We create, we experience, we get feedback, and then we evolve, or we have at least a decision to evolve with that. And so really kind of when I break down that concept of, what does God actually mean, it's just to give us a little bit wider perspective of, what our true purpose is and why we're actually creating to begin with.
Yeah, and I think, like, that way of looking at it, it's relevant and impactful for everybody, no matter, like, what your spiritual beliefs are, no matter, like, what your cultural background is, your religious background. And then for me, like, when I think about it in context of my own life, and I think about coming back to myself and growing, I find it so interesting that sometimes, like, I'm victim to it, and we all could probably relate, is that we're pulled away from decisions that are best for our true selves. Like, there's something enticing for whatever reason, something that pulls us to do stuff that we consciously know probably isn't best for us in the long run. That could be something, that affects your physical health, something that affects your mental health, something that, you'll be stressed out if you, at work later in the week, if you procrastinate on something. Like, procrastination, or just things we do to pull us away from what we know will make us feel whole, will make us feel best. And I just always wonder why. Like, why is that part of the human experience where we're not automatically pulled to do what's best for us? Because sometimes that seems to come second.
And I was just basically saying, like, that's a beautiful observation, because that's part of God experiencing, source experiencing itself. There are laws within that source created to create this infinite feedback loop of awareness. And the first law is one that no matter what, like we are all part of the macrocosm, right? We are the microcosm just having the same experience in a very minimal way. And then the second is polarity. This is a law of the universe. And that's really the fun part for this feedback loop, because it gets to understand that there is light and that there's dark. There's a positive and negative. And this is very, very simple to understand if you take in any science class and you have a proton, electron, and a neutron, right? It's all about understanding polarity and then how do we come back to center, right? And so this is really the present moment. This is the here and now. This is source at its finest. And this is that concept we'll talk about, like this love consciousness, to like how do we understand both polarities, and then how do we shift towards that positive polarity, but also kind of come back to the center of understanding that there also is a negative polarity. And you don't necessarily have to choose negative. We have the choice to choose both, but where do we again come back to the ground level with this? So this will kind of lead me into now this idea of what it means to be multidimensional, because it's something I've been throwing out there throughout this conversation. And I just want to give you guys a little bit more perspective of understanding that we really are these really special infinite beings that have this potential to really, again, create anything and everything that we want. And that becomes very clear once we start to expand our perspective that we are much more than, again, just the physical body, right? So if we talk about your physical body, this is your first dimension of your state of being, right? Your flesh, bones, anatomy, biology, physiology, all those little things that actually make up the physical structure. We are also an emotional body, this dimension that is your feelings and sensations. And there's a spectrum of them, right? We have hate, anger, frustration, rage. We have, anxiety, fear. We also have, happiness and joy and excitement, right? We have all these wide spectrums, the polarities, right? And then we have a center point. Then we have this energetic body, right? This third dimension of our being. And this is where we start talking about energy. And this is where, if we were to bring science more into the concept of source and what God is, there's a lot of details when it comes into how energy forms this dimension, this plane of existence. And this comes in through our electromagnetic field. So it could be as simple as, to understand that, you could just look at your nervous system and how that creates electricity throughout your body, and how you are literally a magnet to be able to attract or push away. We are also another dimension called the love dimension. We are a love consciousness. And I'm not saying this in terms of an emotion. This is an actual state of being. This is what we are at balance. We are love. Then we are an etheric body. This is the concept of everything's in motion. This is sound, or a term I would use called sacred geometry, of how that actually makes this plane of existence, dimension of within ourselves you can't necessarily see, but everything's in motion. Everything is vibrating. Our atoms on an anatomical structure, it's not just still. It's always vibrating. It's always in motion. We have light. So light, you could just think about the rainbow, the spectrum of the rainbow, and how light actually forms into matter. And then lastly, we are a soul. This is at our highest essence. This is our purest form of self that experiences all those other dimensions below it to have, again, this unique human experience. So just kind of revamping up, or re-reviewing those 7 dimensions, these 7 layers of what we actually are. Again, we're a physical body, we are an energetic body, an emotional body, love body, etheric body, light body, and we are a spiritual body. And so that kind of gives us a perspective of, okay, well, The first is we never really think about ourselves like that, right? I mean, we are mostly a physical dimension of being within this reality of life and this existence. Mm-hmm. So, we're kind of aware of emotions. We're kind of aware of energy, I think, collectively. I think the idea is how do we come back to being aware that we are consciousness of love? I don't think the higher ones, right? We talk about vibration and light and soul. That's probably where many of us are not as curious or maybe a little bit disconnected. And so, like you said, it's like coming back to the whole, coming back to the present of understanding that we are much more than, again, just one of these.
It's interesting too, like, even though it consists of 7 parts, I think what's important to know is that each part is associated with the other. Like how we take care of our physical body affects our emotional body, our energetic body. Like they're not distinct, although they are different. They don't live in separate places. Like they all live within you. So, and you could probably speak better about this than me, but like, and that's where CrossFit becomes such an interesting point to like dive into next, as like there's this foundation and then this and then that and that and that, and like everything you do influences the other. Mm-hmm. There's not one, something you do for your energetic body, something you do for your physical body is not going to have no effect. Like it'll have an effect on the rest of you.
I love it. And that's really where we're going to try to make this a little bit more palatable for you guys now. I'm talking about all these dimensions of ourself and, all these, things that might kind of take you off track. But again, we're going to try to bring this back to like, how does this allow you to understand your purpose as a creator? How do you learn how to manifest? And how do we bring it back to what we love, which is CrossFit? And so let's talk about CrossFit as an actual multi-dimensional program. And this is the reason why I love CrossFit so much, and I recognized very early on, is that these layers to what actually make the methodology really resonate with who we are as human beings. And so let's talk about these now 7 layers or these dimensions of what make CrossFit what it is. And the first, if we have a pyramid, the foundation is nutrition. Mm-hmm. This is why we really encourage you guys to stay involved and to understand, everything that Coach Amy puts out for us with Fueling Fitness Nutrition, because you truly cannot out-train a bad diet, and you can't out-train, a bad life through nutrition habits. Like the source and the intake you put in your body, everything's going to affect you on that physical level. Mm-hmm. And it's super important we really pay attention with that. And that's what the methodology at its essence really, it's fundamental that we focus on nutrition. And then we move up, right? The next dimension would be gymnastics. This idea of using your body as a tool to move in free space, right? So we have our push-up, pull-up, burpee, handstands, all these things, L-sits, everything that we do here, just with your body, incorporate one dimension that's a component of CrossFit. Then we move up. We have weightlifting. And the way that I describe weightlifting in the article is the empowerment of resistance through external forces. So really, anytime we use weight in here, in addition to gravity, that is weightlifting. Med ball, dumbbell, barbell, kettlebell, right? Your strength, your power, like these components are super important as a whole. And then we move into the center point of CrossFit, which is community, which is really how we find balance through all of this, right? Kind of coming back to like our why of like, why do we even do CrossFit to begin with, is to find connection on a much more deeper meaning than just improves our physical health. And really that's our center point, right? That's our consciousness of love embodying itself in CrossFit. And then we move up, we go into this concept of monostructural movements. So this is all the monotonous, cyclical things that are really endless, right? They're always endless in time and space. So it's infinite, right? With our bike, running, jumping, rowing, those are monostructural movements. And then we go up into this idea of blending those lower dimensions into what we call metabolic conditioning or work capacity, which really is the unique component of CrossFit. We talk about in the physical part of us or our being, that's resonates with light, that light dimension of ours. And this whole spectrum, right? Metabolic conditioning is this whole spectrum of all the things below us that really are created to express, this fitness component. And then we have at the end, which is lifestyle, right? How do we apply everything below on this pyramid that transition to you finding your true self, your soul, your spirit? What provides you this happiness to live a healthy, fulfilling life, and also translate that in other ways? In CrossFit, they say sport, right? This doesn't necessarily mean go play a sport. It's just how do you apply everything that you do here on all these different dimensions and layers of CrossFit into your daily lifestyle?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think sometimes when you are doing CrossFit or any similar fitness routine every day, you forget about the actual structure of this pyramid, and you forget that it is a bunch of parts of a whole. It's so easy. One of the best, statements about CrossFit is that you're specializing and not specializing. You're a whole being. You're a whole complete person. And it's just, I think, a lot of old school CrossFit gyms will have that pyramid just like up on the wall. And I think it's relevant to always be mindful of because, in everyday life, it's easy to forget that it's not just about one thing. It's about the big picture. It's about every aspect, and every aspect influences the other. And most importantly, your nutrition. Like what we put into our bodies is insanely important. And like a lot of times we forget that. And I think that you'll feel better, you'll move better if you have that foundation. And then if you move better, you'll start to apply it to that and that and that. So just this constant cycle of understanding each level and then bringing it back to center. I think being first aware of that and then putting it into practice can make a huge difference as a CrossFit member and just as a person in general who wants to grow and evolve.
I was just coming back to this thought too. We were talking about like the polarities, right? Pulling you in different directions. This is a law of the universe. And I was thinking, just kind of off topic, but I saw this post about nutrition, right? And it was talking about, like people talk about diets. Like when you eat healthy food, you're on a diet. But like, no, like that's just what we're supposed to do. There's such thing as a diet, y'all. Like we are designed to eat natural whole foods. And so we're always going through a polarity in nutrition and that fundamental baseline of our, CrossFit existence that are going to pull us, because like, hey, listen, we're going to love that mac and cheese. We're going to love that pizza and enjoy that burger. But, part of that is the human experience, right? But again, it's how do we come back to balance. So we're going to transition now. And now I'm going to tell you how you can, ready? Commercial time, ready? Have you ever wanted to manifest $1 million, buy this amazing home for you and your family on 20 acres of land? Are you looking for the perfect career, endless opportunities? Well, guess what? I'm going to teach you how to manifest. Join CrossFit MFP, manifest now, see you soon, right? So listen, we're talking about creation, right? When we hear that, I call it like a buzzword of manifesting, right? We hear it in so many different communities and worlds. But really, I'm going to give you guys right now a little breakdown of what manifesting means through these 4 steps. And then really have you, again, we'll come back to the ground level for you to understand, like, what does it mean to actually use CrossFit and fitness as a tool to help you use these 4 steps. And so the first thing is we want to recognize in the first step that we do have a purpose and we are special. Like we are special. And like just the fact that like if you tell yourself every day, like I'm special in a way that's not narcissistic or egoic, it's just to, again, bring your awareness back to like you have these layers. You have these multidimensional layers that are really going to allow you to maximize what you can do and how you can create. And the way I explain purpose is service. So through whatever you start to think or start to manifest, start to create in your mind, does that intention have a service to one of three things, or all three? Does it have a service to yourself? Does it have a service to others? And does it have a service to all life, nature, the earth, the stars, everything? Because again, as above, so below, we're all connected. That's the law of the universe. So if we come back to our purpose with manifesting and creating, do we have an intention of service? So when I create this thought of, I'm going to come to the gym, right? I'm going to manifest. I'm going to go to the gym, okay? What's the intent behind that? What are you trying to serve? Now, obviously, you're trying to serve yourself. But then you're going to learn that coming to the gym early, you're going to start expanding your awareness to have service to others by your transformation and your change. And you're going to start to feel like you're more connected and open to not just others, but to everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a huge point. You know, like when you show up to the gym, especially like if you've been out of fitness for a while, you know, we have a new member here who told me, he's like, yeah, one of my main motivations for joining was I had a daughter like less than a year ago, and I want to be there for her. I want to be healthy for her. I want to show up for her. And you know, he joined, and he's here to be his best self, not just for him, but for his daughter, for his family, for those around him. You know, you're improving yourself for a purpose, for a reason, and it's about you, and then it's about more than you. And I think, you know, in our world, it's important to recognize that, because kind of like Jackie said last week, like there's a reason you fill your cup first. It's so you could be there for others. You know, it's for a reason.
And most of you are probably already creating and manifesting for service, but the important part is this is simply take moments to become conscious, to become aware. And this is key to truly manifesting, right? Is to understand these acts of service that you're doing. And so now we're going to move on to the second step. The second step is sometimes hard for a lot of people, and it's coming back to the self. And so what do I mean by coming back to the self? It's really finding that balance point of love, your love and your worth for yourself. And really it's as simple as looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I love myself. And this is really hard. This is where the concept of polarities and social conditioning and media and generational trauma, ancestral trauma, and just life circumstances all are going to pull us away from who we are, why we're here, you know, what our purpose is, right? And so how do we have tools in our toolbox that are going to bring us back to the self and coming back to being balanced and finding that self-love that's going to allow us to move on to the next step?
Yeah, and you know, knowing that you loving yourself is not an ego thing. Like you love yourself because you know what you offer. You know what you're doing for others. You know what impact you make on those around you, your career, your family, your friends. You know the difference you make. And that's why you love yourself. It's not a thing built out of ego. It's a thing out of recognition for like, these are my gifts. This is what I do. This is how I help.
Yeah. And that's part of the balance too. Like, do we recognize when it becomes egoic to where we're actually blinded from the self? Yes. And so, you know, that's maybe a little general, but that's part of our experience, is to find the self, to really understand and to connect with the self. And how do we do that? Well, I mean, again, there's a lot of tools, and we'll talk about how, again, fitness and CrossFit are going to be one of these really cool tools that you can have to be able to do that. And when it comes to manifesting, and then also just, you know, when I talked about the self from our multidimensional layers, like this is the soul. Just again, the essence of our souls and our spirit that are, again, trying to communicate with us, to become aware of it, right? It wants the human physical dimension of self to become aware of the spiritual self. And so how do we understand the messages, the communication that's coming from true self to become in recognition to find, again, that center point. And so that's where we're going to go into our third step, which is finding passion. And so passion is a very vital step, but it cannot be achieved until you hit the steps below it, right? So to get to step passion, where we really are starting to manifest, right, this is how we know we're going to start to find our path and actually create a reality that is designed specifically for you. And so passion is the simple explanation of like what excites you in your life. Like, what do you find exciting? Do you feel like the emotional, use your tools, right? Your emotional dimension of self, or it could be an energetic, like I just kind of know, I feel, or maybe it's intuitive, right? This is the light. This is the light dimension of self, where you're starting to really just have this deeper sense of like, this is something I should do. This is somewhere I should go. Maybe you feel this, vibration, sense of energy within yourself that really attracts you to doing that, right? And so that's how you know you're starting to manifest, when you start to have passions. And so that way you can act on those passions.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you got to just trust your intuition. Like, you know what your passions are. And no one else can tell you. You got to trust yourself. You can't look outward. This is one of the most important points. Just look inward and trust. Trust that this is something that matters to you. This is something that's important to you. Not seeking reassurance or recognition on that. It's a complete inward process.
And another part of passions too is that, these are the messages, but the bigger picture with passions is that a passion doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to change the world. Right? We know that we have an act of service through our thought. We know that there's a self-love with that. And we know that we're going to make a difference through our passion because of the service aspect. But it's just a subtle difference. It doesn't have to be miraculous. It's just something small that you can have a passion to act towards. And this is kind of what I put in the article. I notion that this is the fun part of Source. Getting feedback. It wants to see us act through passions, so that way we can have this continuous evolution of these passions pulling us into the right directions in our lives that really come back to our center point, come back to, again, like who we are and why we're here. And so to finish the fourth step, it's the active awareness. Right? And that's really, again, kind of coming back to, again, this infinite process, is to be aware of these three steps that are happening when we find, our access, when we find this creation for service, when we find this, sense of self, when we find these passions that are now coming into our life that we can act on. And now I'm aware of all this happening as one. And then the true act of manifesting is to not actually do anything anymore. Now I'm creating so much. I'm finding my passion. I'm in the present moment. I no longer need to think about doing X, Y, and Z, being in the past, being in the future. Once I start to formulate these passions, I am present. I am here. It's just let's just say, for example, being at the gym. Like, I never have to work a day in my life. I'm just here. This is my passion. And so now I'm living in the present without thinking about anything else going on. And then you manifest through attraction now. Now that I'm in the present, we say the saying is, you raise your vibration, you raise your auric, your energetic field, to now attract everything that you would say, I'm not going to say want or need, but is designed to come to you to allow you to find the evolution that you're designed to have. And that's, again, kind of a tricky concept. It's just simply the state of being now. You don't have to think about acting on passions anymore. You're doing it. You're doing the passions. The passions are coming to you. You're just continuing this infinite process, and you're continuing to evolve. And, it's easier said than done. Like, again, there's still going to be polarity. There's still going to be positive and negatives. But essentially, if you are working on passions that are exciting, fulfilling, right, you're going to attract those equal things. And the same goes for the negative, though. If you're creating negative thoughts of service that are going to bring things down, and if you're creating negative thoughts to yourself, if you're, thinking about things that suck and you're acting on things that stink, quote unquote, then you are then aware that you are this negative vibration, and you are going to attract the equal things, which are negative things.
Yeah, and I don't think you could say it any better than that. Like, there's so much power in two things. One, being in the present moment, and two, trusting that you are on the right path. Because I think that's an element of it too, especially when the goal is to be here now and not look behind, look ahead.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point when you got to trust what you're doing in that present moment is what you should be doing. And and once you do that, you'll find this sense of comfort, this sense of peace, this sense of knowing that, like, hey, like, I am creating, I am attracting, I am doing what I'm meant to do just by being here, and it kind of takes a lot of that, that distress and worry out of your mind, because, everything you need to be doing is right here in front of you, and you're in it,
Yeah. And that's really, where I'm trying to come at with all this. And so I think that bigger question is like, well, how do I actually know that I'm manifesting and creating, all these things, and like, how do I know I'm in the right here and now? And so in the article, I list a few tools. The first one is finding synchronicities in your life. And so that happens through a few different things. First could simply be numbers. It could be colors. It could be actual, like, material things, like an animal or, a situation or a circumstance in your life. When you start to become aware, like, that's that fourth step, you're becoming more aware. And so you actually notice synchronicities because they're always happening. This is how we, I got to get a little off topic. We're breaking the quantum code here. We are actually shifting timelines of a reality that, again, are more purposeful and meaningful because, again, you're aware of it. And then, simplest things is like, are you able to find gratitude? Can you find gratitude in the little things? That's how you know you're actually creating a reality that's designed to your true self. Finding, again, it's the little tiny things. It's one of the reasons why we do our gratitude circle. And then the last thing is, like, just become aware, like, what am I actually attracting in my life? Are people who have really poor attitudes, like, wanting to connect with me? Or people who, like, want to better themselves, want to feel positive? Are they coming into my life? Or circumstances, or opportunities, or careers? And so just be aware of those three things. And that's how you can kind of really come back to, like, how am I manifesting? How am I creating this reality worth living? So what I want to do is just to, again, bring this more about the ground level with you as we start to close up this podcast. And I want to talk about, why physical fitness and doing really just movement in general is so important for our ability to manifest, because, again, it really embodies even the important dimension of ourself, like having a physical body. And so in the article, I talk about Earth as a video game, and it really is. I mean, I could go as deep as talking about how, all these, you can say, interdimensional beings, planetary beings, ETs, source, infinite awareness, all of these things are looking at us right now with their popcorn, with their game controller, and they're just, it's just waiting to see how all this plays out. How do we actually take our free will, and how do we understand these forms of self, and understanding that the physical dimension is so unique to the Earth video game. It's level 1, but it's a hard level, because the physical reality of us, I mean, it's going to have, physical challenges. And so when we come back to doing things that involve movement, we allow ourselves to expand our other parts of ourselves, these other multidimensional parts, so much more clear because it's the easiest thing we have access to. And it's super unique to this video game. And I really just think that, for us in general is like continue to find this ground level through our movement.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like, I love the idea of like viewing life as a video game because, sometimes in like the digital world or the video game world, it's easier to see ourselves as like the hero and stuff. And like, but you know what?
Yeah.
In real life, like you're living it. Like you're here.
That's right.
You're now. Like, do those things. Like be who you want to be. You don't have to. Like I love video games. I'm a video game guy.
Yes.
But like, you don't have to be in another digital world to like have a really cool reality. Live it. And I think Earth, the video game, I like that. Be who you want to be in a video game. Just you don't gotta pretend.
Well, I mean, that is very true. And I also thought, like, again, we talked about last week about, physical fitness. And I talk about in an article, like how even movement is multidimensional in terms of creation, how we're always creating when we move. For example, like when you move, you break down cells and you build new ones at an accelerated rate. So when we move, we are in resonance with source. We are creators at a much more accelerated rate. And coming back to like those 4 steps of manifesting, like when we come to the gym, I said it, like we are creating an act of service for ourselves. When we work out, we feel better about ourselves, right? Yeah. When we move, like every class, like we talk about, like you might feel poo-poo when you come into the class, but you always feel better afterward. Now you have the choice to feel better, right? You could say like, oh, this workout was hard for me, but like, can you be like, I showed up today, I did it, I got 1% better, right? Self-worth, self-love. I then get out of the gym and then I start looking at, my work and my lifestyle a little differently. I have a little bit more energy, a little bit more juice to do my work, even though if I feel like this work is not my favorite job ever, I'm still going into that with a different mindset to be like, you know what? Like I'm here. I have a little gratitude, for the little things that I have at this opportunity. And then you're just organically expanding your awareness and your consciousness to just be and just attract better things into your life. And we can do that on a lot of different levels if we really start tapping into our multidimensional being. But starting with the physical is not necessarily going to say the easiest. It's the most challenging to some extent because it takes hard work and discipline. But it's the easiest because we have the easiest access to it with our movement, right? And so that's kind of really what I want you guys to think about with, how we use movement as manifesting. And, just remember coming back to balance. That's always a big thing, like recognizing the whole. And even when you're here with your workouts, right? How do I come to balance with, being overly joyous, right? Trying to always put myself in a dark place. So when you see the MFP program, like we're always trying to find balance. It's not always a dark place workout. It's not always a super light, intense feeling, amazing, right? So how do we kind of work those middle grounds and, just create, that holistic point of view for you guys?
Yeah, just stay open, understand that like, when you understand that you're multi-dimensional, you live your life in a multi-dimensional way, and that's the most important thing to take away. Like, you're meant to experience, positives, negatives, this, that, like, but always coming back to the whole. Whether you're enjoying something or not, that's fleeting. That's not the point. Yeah. It's not about temporary enjoyment. It's not about, what you're feeling. It's about who you are and what you're doing to make that what you want a reality and to attract what you want and to be who you want and to do what you want. So, it's all about these habit changes.
Yeah. Love it. So we'll wrap this up here. So I'll just give you guys some advice before we wrap it up. And so again, like how do I know I'm manifesting? I think one of the first things you can look into is, like, again, what are you attracting into your life? Is it positive? And if it's positive, that's probably how you know you're on the right path. If it's negative, that's where you kind of have to like take a look back and be like, okay, well, who am I? What am I doing? What am I creating in my life? And then, how do I know if I'm my true self? Because that's a hard thing, right? And I start to look at, the idea of passions. Like, is it easier for you to find passion in something that you do? Or is it difficult? Right? And just kind of create like that narrative and awareness, like is it easy for me to find passions or not? And then the second is, like how do you look at life? Do you look at life first from a positive perspective or from a negative perspective? And I know it kind of gets woo-woo, but this is true. And this is literally going to change your reality. You will create once you start to understand, your passions, your positivity. And so I'll just end like, my passions are coaching. I thoroughly enjoy the idea of helping others, right? That's why I opened this to begin with. And this is like who I am. This is my essence. I know I'm somebody that's designed to create and gather people, right? Bring people together, find community. I say curiosity. One of my big things is to continue to ask questions and to grow, right? And I want to continue to find truth and learn about the universe and learn about physical movement. Courage. I think courage is a big part of my passion because it's to continue to do things even when they're looked at from a perspective that are like, well, that's dumb, right? But I know I'm true to myself, and I have the courage to try new things and do new things and be me. And the last would be commitment, right? Just showing up. So I got the 5 C's: coaching, community, curiosity, courage, commitment. Boom. So what are your passions? Joe, you got a passion?
For me,
Dogs?
I have a lot. I mean, my passions, one, are connection. I love to just connect with people of all different backgrounds. Like I could find something that I could relate to with just about anybody, and it's something that like I love that. Like I love to meet new people and learn about new people and find some commonality. Community, serving others and helping others grow, and coaching, and of course, like I'm definitely passionate about the natural world. One of my reasons I fell in love with gardening was like I felt like I could really hear, I could hear the earth talking to me, and like I'm excited for fall because fall is like the time that like nature speaks to me the most. So just finding connection with myself as a part of this greater world, this greater like super complex natural world is like, I don't have 5 C's, but those are a couple.
I'm gonna throw an A in there. Joe's he's got a passion for Aruba. He just got back. He's got a little glow.
Got a little tan.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you to the